Today, I'll be giving you a brief background on D5 Render and how it can enhance your workflow. So we're going to be taking a 3D model from Rhino and Revit and take that initial import into D5 Render and then take it all the way to like final presentation. So to get things started, again, I'll just give you a quick overview of D5 Render, some of the workflow highlights that you can achieve by utilizing D5 Render. And most of the time will be me giving you a live demo of the software. And then we'll end it with some resources that you can utilize in order to keep growing your knowledge on D5 Render. So a little background on D5. We are a standalone visualization software. And what that means is that it provides you a photorealistic real-time result of your actual landscape designs. We're also one of the few or one of the early adopters of AI features when it comes to visualization software. So we can talk about those AI features during the live demo as well as during this presentation. And we also have seamless synchronization between Revit, 3ds Max, SketchUp, Rhino, Vectorworks, ArchiCAD, and we're constantly developing more plugins for these tools so that you can quickly and efficiently import them into D5 Render. And again, since it is a real-time visualization software, you get fast time to quality ratio. So what that means is that you're not waiting hours for your final renderings to be outputted. You can get them in a matter of minutes. Again, increasing your speed time and your workflow. So here is a quick video of the visualization quality that you can come to expect from D5 Render. This video specifically focuses on the broad species of landscape assets that we have in our asset library. And so again, like this is all photorealistic, it's all real time. And the great thing about this is that it's pretty easy to achieve these results. You know, you don't require a deep knowledge base for all of this. The software itself is pretty intuitive, as you'll see once I give the live demo. So how can D5 make landscape design easier and more efficient? And so here are just a couple quotes that we've heard from landscape designers, landscape architects, and just listening to them and what their daily struggles are when it comes to visualization. And so one of them is I'm often struggling to receive files from architects that work in different modeling software than me. And so the beauty of D5 is that we have this thing called D5 Sync, which is a litany of different plugins for your favorite modeling tools. And so all you need to do is just have that plugin tool installed in your modeling software. And then you can bring all of those different modeling formats and marry them in D5 Render. So that's sort of like the unifier for all these different modeling tools. Again, I can showcase what that looks like in practice once I pull up the live demo. Uh, so current asset libraries are limited in my workflow, and I have to settle for the wrong asset or purchase them and optimize them for my projects. So again, this is something that we've heard a lot, other modeling software might not have the greatest asset library out there. So sometimes designers are forced to purchase these 3D models. They might oftentimes be very complex, very heavy, and slow down their actual modeling projects. And so the great thing about D5 Render is that we provide you over 4,000 different nature assets, and we're always expanding our library. And so that includes shrubs, trees, palm trees, herbs, vines, crops, grass, stones, fallen leaves. And we also include like landscape or exterior outdoor furniture like ornamental lamps, exterior furniture. So again, the hope here is that you don't have to keep sourcing all these different 3D models from other third-party third-party stores. You can just get them from D5 Render. They're all included within like your pro membership. And of course, if you do have like some ultra specific assets, you can always go ahead and import them into our software and build up your own custom library. So within the last year, we've been focusing on expanding our North American asset library. So we can take a look at that as well. And that's not to say that we don't include other foliage or nature assets from around the world. It's just that, just this year in particular, we've taken some huge strides in updating our asset library when it comes to North American plants. And we know that just providing you with one large asset library is just one part of the solution. The other part is how do you quickly populate your scene with all these different assets? We don't want you to manually have to brush them in or have to place them one by one. So That's why we've introduced a D5 scatter. So it's really a one-click solution in order to quickly populate your scene with all these nature assets, as you're seeing here in the little GIF. So here the code is, I have a large work area that needs to quickly be populated with thought out designs that aren't just random. And so with D5 scatter, you also do get a lot more control over where all these different nature elements are scattered so that you can actually design with intent from D5 render. I have a site survey, so I can't use D5 scatter, but I still want to have some randomization to my assets. So what this is referring to is that, oftentimes we are dealing with like what's existing, and we might not always have the liberty to start to like brush some assets here and there. And so that's why we have random placement and sync coordinates. So what that means is that you can get the accurate location of your different nature assets, import them into D5 render so they're in the exact same location as was surveyed. And then we have random placement. So what that does, it'll assign some random scaling, transformation, so that it doesn't just look like a bunch of cloned assets. You can get this randomization as you're seeing here, so they look a bit more unique. And here it says I want animations to be easier to bring my scenes to life. So a lot of the assets that we provide to you in our asset library are not only are they customizable, but they also have some animations applied to them. And what's great about this is that you can line them along a path, so you can brush them in, and again, they'll contain these animations as you're seeing here with the traffic, or as you can see here with just the children playing around and the scene to the left. So again, we make it really easy for you to create these animations. You don't have to go ahead and like keyframe everything or create your own, I guess, camera paths. That's all done within D5 render and through like its animated assets as well as our templates, which again, we can see in our live demo. Um, I'm struggling with performance issues when working with large files. They often slow down my workflow. So again, when it comes to nature assets, some of these could be quite heavy and slow down your modeling software. So with D5 Render, you can rest assured that all the assets we provide to you are optimized to run smoothly within D5 Render. And hopefully the size isn't or how massive or the site isn't an issue. You can quickly populate it with all these different nature assets as you're seeing in this scene as well. So how can DeFi Render handle seasonal scenes? So from users, we've heard that, I don't want to showcase my projects under ideal situations. I want to showcase them year round. So with DeFi Render, we have different AI features in order to quickly change the scene or the mood of your renderings. So you can just upload a reference image and DeFi Render will try its best to sort of match the look and feel. And you can upload a winter environment, a rainy environment, and D5 Render will again do its best to match that look and feel. So we can take a look in the demo. And then we also have this AI enhancer. So with that, it's a post-processing effect. So it'll take your rendering to that next level of photorealism. So again, you don't have to become an expert renderer. You can just let D5 Render handle it for you and take your image to that next level. So here are just some more of the environments and effects features that you can get from D5 Render. So as you're seeing in this GIF, you can get a foggy environment, a more autumn looking environment, as well as a winter scene, all of which are just a matter of messing around with a few sliders here and there in D5, and you can get this, again, all these different seasonal changes. And then lastly, we have AI style transfer. So whereas this feature here is more so for like the real-time environment of your D5 render viewport, this is more so a post-processing effect. So once you've rendered out your image, you can very quickly change or alter the time of year, as well as changing it out for a more stylized effect, which we can take a look at as well. And so with all that being said, we can take a look at the live demo where I'll be taking a Rhino and Revit model, and then I'll be marrying them within D5 Render in order to create this finalized rendering here. So here I have my very basic scene. And so first thing I want to do is just open up Rhino. And this works similarly with SketchUp. So for Rhino, and SketchUp, we have plugins for both of them, and they work pretty much identically. So the only model prep that needs to be done here is just going ahead and assigning different material names to the different surfaces in your scene. So for instance, if I go here and take a look at the material, you'll see that it has just a very basic name, and that's it. We're not messing around with the bitmaps or any other values or properties in here. We're literally just assigning material names. And so once that's done, I'll just go ahead and hit connect to D5 render. And so if I jump back into D5 render and minimize my Rhino window, you'll see that this is all being live synced. And you'll notice that we have these two buildings here, which are not part of our Rhino model. And that's because they are part of our Revit model. And so again, the model prep that needs to be done here is just to go ahead and name your different family types with materials. So I'll just go back into my D5 render plugin and hit start D5. And now it is synced up to our D5 render scene. Now, the only difference here between Revit and Rhino is that we currently don't have a live sync for for Revit. So what that means is that if you make any modeling changes here in Revit, for instance, I'll just go ahead and delete this building. I'll have to click sync model in order to see that update in real time in D5 render. So I'll just go back and bring that building back and go ahead and resync my model to bring back that building. And so again, this is showcasing how you can be working with the landscape design in Rhino or SketchUp. And if you're collaborating with another studio or with an architect that's focused on the building, they can share their files with you. And all you need to do is either sync up the model or go into the actual Revit object here and hit replace from local, in which case you can replace it with their Revit model and see their updated designs here in D5 render. So once you have your model here in D5, the next thing you're probably going to want to start doing is start texturizing your scene. And so while we do provide you with a large scale asset library for models, we also have a ton of different materials to choose from in order to quickly start texturizing your scene. So first, I might want to go ahead and apply maybe like a grass material, or sorry, a dirt material to my road here. Maybe some grassland over here. And so as you can see here, it's repeating. So we can quickly solve that by going into our inspector, changing this to custom, scrolling down to UV randomizer, which will solve that for you. And again, here you'll see that it's not repeating anymore and it's pretty seamless. And so while we do have this material library, we also provide you the freedom to quickly go ahead into your local library. And here you can start to create your own custom assets as well as separate your local library by project. So for example, here I have AN webinar. I can go into landscape and here I have all the different materials that pertain to this project. So I can go ahead and add that third back into my scene. And while we do again have a large scale material asset library, you can always keep creating your own assets from within here. And then here's where you can also start to utilize our AI features in order to create materials if we don't have them in our asset library. So for instance, I can go ahead and zoom into the sculpture here. And if I use my eyedropper tool, you'll notice that we don't have any bitmap images in either of these channels. So what I can do is just go in here. And for instance, I want to create this particle board material. And this could be a material that I just found from the manufacturer's website or that I captured on a site visit. And so the thing about sourcing materials this way is that they might not always be the best for material creation. So what I can do here is go into this button and do make seamless. And what that'll do is it'll automatically get rid of these repeating lines for me. And once that's done, I can either upscale this image, which will upscale it by a factor of 2, or I can click on this button for AI generated texture maps. So by clicking on this, it'll actually generate my normals, roughness, and my AO in order to make this look as photorealistic as possible. And I can highlight what these different channels did by going ahead and deleting the base map. So as you can see here, it still has that texture information applied to it, all from the the normals as well as from the AO and roughness, which is the reflection. And so that's how you can, again, go ahead and start to build out your own custom assets or custom materials, because once you've done this step and created all your different channels, you can always go ahead and add this to your local library. So next time you open up your local library, it should just show up over here. And of course, I can go and move to my project folder here. And the last thing I wanted to showcase for materials is that if I go back into my material library and go to custom, I can reset these back to their default textures. And so if again, I just click my eyedropper tool, select this pool material, I can go and use my material templates. So I can go ahead and hit, let's say, water, which will automatically add water into my scene. I can play around with the scaling and maybe make the waves a little bit slower. And I can do that for my glass and grass as well. So here for glass, I'll just go to transparent, which will add my glass material. And then lastly, I can go here and add a grass texture. And for the grass, we have a couple different templates that we can play around with. So we have this one here, and maybe we can go ahead and play around with them, see which one looks the best. And if I scroll down, you'll see that it's actually rendering out each individual blade of grass. So that's how we can start to quickly go ahead and texturize our scene. So the next thing we might want to, so I'll do these two for instance, and I'll line them along a path here. Let's try that again. I'll hit done. And here I have a couple different sliders to play with, like number, random offset, and rotation. And as you can see here, we have a couple trees that are intersecting with our topography. So what I can do here is just bring these all the way up and enable drop. And now they'll all start to conform to my topography here. And so lastly, the other way that I wanted to show you how to populate your scene is to go back into Rhino or SketchUp. And for instance, here I have a layer that's turned off, which is just a placeholder for where my trees would go. So as you can see here, they've been populated in my scene. And so all I need to do in Rhino is go into export, export by layer, and I'll do 3-layer structure, and I'll hit export. And then back in D5, I'll import that export, bring it into my scene. And now I can click on the sync coordinates button, which will drop it into the exact same location as my 3D modeling software. So now I can go back into Rhino and hide those trees. And since they're in the exact same location that I want them to be in, I can go back to my object list, go into tree export, select all of these placeholders, right click and do replace from assets. And now I can swap it out with one of our actual high quality D5 render trees. So here is what that looks like. And again, these are all pretty much identical. So what I can do here is with all of them selected is click on random size and random rotation just to give them some variation. And so that's how I can quickly start to populate my scene with different 3D assets. And so by following this method of just using like brush, scatter, and path, I can quickly go ahead and populate the scene with different assets. And the other way that we make populating your scene with assets very efficient is through D5 scatter. So to showcase D5 scatter, we can go to this plane here, and I'll just decrease my exposure. And so with this plane in view, I can go to this button here, select by material, and I'll select this area here and hit create. And D5 will automatically recognize it as a scatter area. And so from here, we have a couple different options. We have our global preset as well as our content preset. So for global preset, it's more so about the layout and the patterning of our different foliage assets. And the content preset is the actual asset types themselves. So for instance, I can go here into global preset and it'll bring up our scatter library. And I can do something like uh, checkerboard lawn. And again, here I'll just play around with the exposure and you'll see that it created that checkerboard effect in my scene. And now I can go back into the D5 scatter area and I'll show my scatter highlights. And you'll see that every time I click on sub area 0 or sub area 1, these checkerboard areas are being highlighted. So it's actually created different distribution areas for me. So I can go ahead and click on sub area 0, for instance, go into the content preset. And again, here's where I'm actually telling it what kind of assets I want to be scattered in that highlighted area. So I can do wild grassland. And you'll see that this wild grassland will be only applied to the highlighted areas, as you can see here. So that wild grassland content preset actually contained information for all these different assets. And it's telling you the probability of them appearing in your scene. You can click on them and then you can start to change the distribution as well as the different transform elements here. So you have a lot of room to play with. And the great thing about this is that it's all being controlled or manipulated by this distribution image here. So you can actually create your own distribution images. For example, if I click on this and hit this D5 render logo, you'll see all these different assets conform to that logo as you're seeing here. So I can go in here and play around with the tiling and I can change this to 5 so we can get a better look at this. So here is that D5 render logo. So I can quickly go back to my main scatter area and select a different content preset, or sorry, a global preset. So I can do something like natural meadow here. And now that it's created this area here, or actually, let's do something a bit more dramatic. Let's do this flower field. And so here is what that looks like. And so if I go ahead and hide this D5 scatter, you'll notice that we have a path here that's being completely hidden by our D5 scatter. So we can quickly solve that by going to effects, creating a culling effect and selecting that path and hitting create. And so now where that overlap was, it'll completely get rid of that. So that's how I can start to manipulate or control where that distribution area is happening. And more so, you can go ahead and edit your cull range. So I can select maybe 0.5 and you'll see that it's offsetting where that path is. And here we can go into fall off area. And here we can play around with that transition, make it a bit more gradual, a bit more smoother. As you can see here. And again, I'll just go ahead and add a texture to this area here. And so now that we understand the principles of D5 scatter, we can use these principles to quickly populate our scene that we were working on earlier. So I'll just go ahead and delete this D5 scatter. And I can go to my original scene here. Actually, let me see if I can turn on my furniture. Yeah, so there's the furniture. And so where I had this brush effect on the grass, I'll just go ahead and delete that and we can replace it with a D5 scatter. All right, so here is our scene and now I can select D5 scatter, select by material, and I'll select this lawn area and hit create. And now I can go ahead and go into global preset and change it out for like a natural meadow. So here is our scene. And the great thing about this as well is that while I've only been playing around with like the preset options that DeFi Render provides to you, you can also start to make these your own. And so for instance, if I go into sub area 0, I can see the different assets that are being arranged here. So I can actually select this icon, go into this arrow button here, and replace that asset with something else within our library. So just so that we can get a sense of what that looks like, I'll just select this tree here. And now that tree is going to be randomly placed along my scene here. As you can see here. So again, we might not want that, but using those principles, that's how you can start to create your own DeFi scatter. So I can go ahead and do save to my space, and now it's saved as a DeFi scatter preset. So here I'll go into use a studio preset so that we can select a global scatter that I've done in the past. So I can go into scatter and select this residential lawn. And here we'll just wait a little bit. So yeah, here we go. And here's the final result of what that scatter looks like. This is my residential lawn, which I went ahead and created. And I can go to the back here and I can select this area here, hit create. And here is where I want to add my trees. So I can go back to use the studio preset and do residential trees. And now it'll start to add my trees in the background. And then another great thing about this is that you can also start to layer these. So if I go back to my lawn scatter, let me just name these real quick. So if I go back into my lawn scatter, I can go into edit scattering surface. So this one's already selected, but I can select this one back here as well and hit done. And now this area here has both my lawn scatter as well as my tree scatter. So we'll just give that a little bit of time to think. So yeah, here are the final results. And so by utilizing this concept of creating your own scatter presets, you can also change the biomes or have predetermined biome presets. So for instance, here I have my residential lawn, but I can just as easily swap it out for a desert lawn. So I can have a very specific desert species apply to this preset. And then I'll just go ahead and add a more rocky sand texture to my ground here. And I can also go into tree scatter and use a different preset. So I'll use my desert trees. Right, so here are those desert trees in the background. So as you can see here, these are the trees that are being used in the background. And then the last option that we can do is more of a tropical environment. So I can do this tropical lawn. And lastly, for my trees, I can use my tropical trees here. And so since the trees that I manually placed are not part of the D5 scatter, once this is completed, I'll just go and hide those. So here you can get a sense of what those trees actually look like. And so lastly, what we can do is now that we've gone ahead and quickly populated our scene, we can go back into our AI atmosphere match. And maybe I can do more of a desert environment. To match our scene here. So again, let me just revert back to desert trees. and desert lawn. All right. And then here I'll just hit apply. So again, now that we've populated our scene with assets and started to texturize everything, we should get a more accurate AI atmosphere match. All right. Maybe I want to go into effects and just increase the contrast here or lower the color correction intensity. And so again, once I'm happy with the results, we can start to do our final rendering export. So we can either go into image export where we can do a still rendering or a panel rendering, as well as uh, enabling our different channels if we want to take this into post-processing. Or we can go into video if we want to create an animation. So creating an animation is pretty simple. All you need to do is just go into your starting position. And then from here, we have a bunch of different camera templates that you can play with. So if I go into templates, I can do something like horizontal pull, which will apply that movement to my camera here. And so the idea is that you really just need to click a bunch of starting points and then again, select a template. And by using that workflow, you can create something that's pretty cinematic and ready to be presented. So here's just a quick animation that I did just by utilizing our template. And then lastly, the other thing I wanted to talk about is AI post-processing. So again, we really want D5 Render to be a sort of start to finish tool. And so what that means is that hopefully you don't have to take D5 Render, or sorry, you don't have to take your final rendering from D5 to any post-processing tools. You can hopefully do that straight from D5 Render itself. So if we go to our render queue and we go into history, you can see all the renderings that we've done from this file. And if we click on this purple icon here, it'll bring up our AI post-processing window. So if I look at my previous tasks, um, I can bring up this rendering here, which is our base rendering. And now we can use our AI post-processing tool, which comes with our AI enhancer, as well as our AI style transfer. And we can start to tell D5 Render the different styles that we want it to match. So for instance, if here is that base rendering, we can go into AI style transfer. And from here, we have a couple different stylized effects to choose from. And we also have realistic here on the right. And so here we can start to toggle between what those results look like. So here we have watercolor. Again, this is more stylized if you're in the early conceptual phases and you don't want the client to get too hung up on the details. So that's watercolor. And this is the marker effect. And then you can also change the time of day as well as the seasonality. So here is that rendering in nighttime mode, as well as maybe winter and autumn. And so that's our AI style transfer. We also have our AI enhancer, which again should hopefully take your rendering to that next level of photorealism. And it works particularly well for 3D characters. So if you utilize our 3D character library, you can add your characters in here. And if you run our AI enhancer, it'll add in some more facial details to them, make them look a bit more photorealistic, a bit more like PNG cutouts, and less like these 3D character assets. So again, during this live demo, we took a look at how to bring your 3D model from your modeling software over to D5 render, and then how you can start to texturize it, play around with the 3D assets, as well as create your scenes and lighting properties. So we can go back to the presentation. And so if you want to learn more about D5, here are a bunch of different resources that you can take a look at. So we have our Discord channel as well as D5 Scene Express. So if we go into our website, you can go into resources and Scene Express. And these are actual 3D scenes that you can go ahead, click on, and follow the download link. And you can play around with these, see how they were created in D5 Render. We also have a bunch of different YouTube videos, our Facebook community. And if you run into any issues, you can always email us at support@d5text.com. Here's all our different contact info, so please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions. So again, thank you all for taking the time to listen and to learn more about D5 Render. I really enjoyed talking about it, so hopefully you guys enjoyed hearing about D5 Render as well. So I'll just open up the floor for any questions.
Thank you so much for that, Jeffrey. I saw a couple questions come in that your colleague answered, but I believe this one just came in. So, it's from Usman saying, is it possible in the future to add a live sync for V-Ray since the quality of the assets are great and it would be a great combination to conquer the visualization industry?
A live sync for V-Ray. I'm not sure because right now we're focusing on live sync for 3D modeling tools. And as I understand, I believe V-Ray is a visualization software. So I'm not sure. I mean, we are looking into, of course, providing live sync capabilities to the 3D modeling softwares that we support right now, because live sync is only available for Rhino, SketchUp, Vectorworks, and 3ds Max. So hopefully we can provide live sync support for all the different 3D modeling softwares that we support.
Wonderful. Next question from Sonia is asking, can you remove single plants or objects from the general scatter area?
Yes. So if we go back into D5 render, if you're using D5 scatter, you can just double click on an asset and hit detach. And now you can go ahead and delete it. If you're using the brush tool, you can hit Alt, which is sort of the eraser tool, and then you can, again, maybe lower the radius so that you can delete individual assets. So yeah, you can use the detach feature in D5 scatter to remove individual plants.
Wonderful. Um, Crystal's asking, how detailed does the plant material get?
It can get pretty detailed. I mean, if we go into D5 render again, um, if I just select the plant itself, here are all the different channels associated to the plant. And then we can also go ahead and change the look or the hue and saturation of our plants or of our, so let me zoom in here and see if we can get a closer look. Yeah, we can start to change the colors of the leaves. So yeah, they're pretty detailed and we're using our foliage templates, which means that you get like that subsurface scattering. So there is some like light passing through these leaves, if that's what you're referring to.
Uh, Great. George is asking, can you model in D5 and any information on cost?
Yes. So I think we're just now getting into, I guess, 3D modeling in D5 Render because again, it's a visualization software. But recently in our latest update, we've implemented this terrain feature. And so if you just click on that, it'll add this infinite plane. And now you can start to, if I scroll all the way up, now you can start to sculpt out your terrain. So this is sort of, modeling in a sense. You can also go ahead and go into height map resources and import some presets in here. I'm sorry for what was the second part to that question?
Information on cost.
Oh, yes. So if we go into our website and pricing, you can find our pricing structure. And of course, you can always feel free to reach out to us and yeah, we can help you with that as well.
Great. Sonia's asking, how did you get the trees to replace assets from Rhino that were within your imported model?
Yes, so with that, you can go into your modeling software. And again, you can do this from SketchUp, Rhino, Revit, and I'll just bring those placeholder trees in from my Rhino scene, and then I'll hit this export icon, and I'll do export by layer, and I'll do 3-layer structure, and that'll actually export it as a D5A file, which is D5 Render's native format. And once you import that into your scene, it'll show up in your imports tab. I can drop it in here, and then just select this sync coordinates button. And once that's done, the final step would be to select those assets, right click and do replace from assets. And now you can swap it out with any asset from our asset library. It doesn't even have to be nature assets. It could be characters or vehicles or yeah, furniture assets as well.
Wonderful. I'm not seeing any more questions at the moment. If anybody does have any questions, we have a minute or two here. Please drop those in the chat or the Q&A now. Is there anything else you'd like to touch base on, Jeffrey, while we wait for questions or close out for the day?
No, I mean, yeah, I hope you guys can go ahead and scan this QR code, play around with D5 Render, see how that fits into your workflow. Again, we're always listening to the community, so if there's any feedback that you guys have, we're happy to hear it. But yeah, I hope that D5 Render can be incorporated into your workflow. And again, really appreciate everybody taking the time to listen.
Sorry, a couple questions did just come in real quickly. I believe Sonia was elaborating on the last question. They're saying, is that only possible when in sync mode about
Uh,
replacing the trees?
no, it's possible if you're just yeah, it's possible in any I guess way that you're connecting with D5 Render.
Okay, great. And then Stanley's asking, is it also specific to use of layers for SketchUp like Rhino?
Um, so when you're importing into D5 Render, it's importing everything as one single object, as you can see here. And the way that it's actually separating everything is by materials, and that's why having everything named with a material in your 3D modeling software is so important. And when it comes to layers, these are all just like made straight from D5 Render. It's not like you're making layers in Rhino or SketchUp and D5 Render is creating those layers based on your modeling software. These are all independent and made in D5 Render.
Awesome. Not seeing any more questions. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for your time. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.